I'm going to get the ball rolling by asking you a few questions, which are pet peeves of mine. I'm going to broaden it out, obviously, to our wonderful expert panel. And we have a huge number of questions that have come in from wherever you are, so thank you very much for that too. I'm going to start with Dr. Ghosh, if I may, while we have you with us, in case suddenly the gremlins get in the way. So you didn't talk about finance, but do you mind if I ask you about finance? Because the ambitions are so huge, what India set itself out to do. But there's no guarantee that because you have ambitions of that sort, they will be deliverable. Is there sufficient finance coming through, or what needs to be done to de-risk climate finance?
Thanks, Nisha, for the question. You've thrown a bait at me, and I will bite. So when it comes to finance, I want to say there's a difference between finance and investment. So let's first of all understand that the scale of this ambition is not just setting out a policy target, but we've managed to actually create a market that is a genuine investable market. India is getting anywhere between $11 to $12 billion of investment in clean energy, and for the past about 6 or 7 years, investments in clean energy have far surpassed investments in fossil fuel on the electricity side. If you now project this forward, from an investment opportunity perspective, the renewables rollout alone is a $200 billion investment opportunity. The electric mobility targets, about which I didn't talk about, is another $206 billion of investment opportunity. And the green hydrogen targets, which is now India's the second largest green hydrogen mission in the world after the United States, is another $140 billion of investment opportunity. So there's $500 billion of investment to be made. Now, you only make investment if you think you're going to get the adequate returns. And this is where the finance story comes in. Your returns from an emerging market are expected to be higher than your returns from a developed country because you assume that the risks are higher in investing in an emerging market. To an extent, that is true, whether you're investing in India or Kenya or Indonesia. But when you actually examine the market, you see there is a big delta between the real risks and the perceived risks. Now, when you're trying to hedge against perceived risks, you're adding on hedging against political risk, policy risk, exchange rate risk, grid interactivity risk, etc., etc., etc. Macroeconomic risk. Now, think about it this way. India's sovereign risk rating has not changed over 20 years, even though it has become the 4th largest economy in the world. So there is something wrong in how the markets are perceiving emerging markets. So how do you de-risk? You can do 2 things. One, domestically. You make sure your policy signals are clear, long-term, certain, so that investors have confidence in that. And that is where these long-term targets, supplemented with the interim targets, are so critical. So over the next 5 years, India is going to auction out about 50 gigawatts of renewables every single year. Investors know that that's going to happen in 2027. It's also going to happen in 2025. While you provide that clear policy signal at home and transparent market design at home, we still need international cooperation to de-risk these projects and programs in emerging markets like India for the non-project risks. So how do we deal with exchange rate fluctuations? If the US Fed increases interest rates, it has nothing to do with India's renewable energy policies and programs. But the cost of finance will go up when the Fed interest rate goes up. The same impacts Indonesia, the same impacts the Philippines. So we need a globally coordinated mechanism to deal with non-renewable energy project risks that reduce the cost of investment for the project developers, but also give the guaranteed returns that the investors want. And that's a win-win, but it requires coordination at a macroeconomic level.
Okay, so we might want to ask Dr. Ghosh a bit more about that. Is he talking about development banks providing this, or market-based solutions providing this? Where is that kind of interim funding likely to come from? Meantime, though, I'd like to pick up on something that everybody has mentioned here, practically, which is the grid. We heard Dr. Ghosh mention about grid connections in India. Joachim mentioned it. Ragnhild mentioned it. So Joachim and Ragnhild, why do we keep talking about this when surely it was so obvious that grid connections would have to be augmented and made more robust if we're going to have more and more renewable power? Joachim.
Well, the grid's always been there, but they have been built in a certain way where you had centralized power production, then you had consumers, and now we're turning that totally around. So we have enormous investments in the grid just simply to connect it to renewable power sources. Now, that wouldn't as such be a problem at all. This is simply just building more of what we already can. The problem is we're all are building at the same time. We had the energy transition started some years ago. We saw a small hoop. Then we had COVID, which basically stopped everything for 6 months, and then we realized that mankind will not die out, so everybody came back to me after 6 months and ordered everything worth of 6 months in one day, another hoop. Then we had the Ukrainian war, also disruptions in supply chains. And then as a result of that, then we are also seeing a lot of nations which are realizing that they cannot count on their neighbors anymore, so everybody's also adding on top of a already constrained market with more and more investments. And those companies who have maintained, I would say, a stable investments in infrastructure and grid over the years are those who are not suffering right now because they have it already there. Those who had a low investments and did not invest up front, those are the ones that are challenged now by the constraints in the supply chains.
Okay, so it's not a universal problem. Ragnhild, to my kind of, I don't understand this, what's going on question, why do we keep talking about grid connections? How would you respond?
I think grid access is critical, and the pace that we're seeing now, makes it difficult to speed up. It's not done overnight to adapt to the renewable production increase. But then also, of course, it's important to, one thing is to invest in grid, which is being done, but also think about other solutions, producing energy where closer to where demand is, looking at energy storage opportunities, and so on. So it's a very big and complex picture, and that also maybe makes it difficult to have the sort of right pace of all of this.
Yeah, but we can't always be playing catch-up, can we? The renewable energy production is ahead of the grid capacity. At some point, it has to come into balance, or we're never going to meet the ambitions, are we? We have tons of questions that have come in on carbon capture, Mona. I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. So I think possibly I'll ask you just a general question to get us going, which is, give us a picture of what you're trying to create. What is the system going to look like in, say, 2030?
2030?
No, maybe you choose a timeline.
I've been working with CCS for 25 years. Actually, CCS was invented here in Trondheim by two researchers at SINTEF, Erik Lindeberg and Thorleif Holt. And they dreamed about doing CO2 capture on an offshore power plant for producing oil and gas. So, that was an oxy-combustion process. I think in the future, and the two full-scale projects we have ongoing in Norway now, the Melkøya and Sleipner, they're about taking out CO2 from natural gas to make this natural gas either producible for LNG or exportable in pipelines. So, but in the full-scale projects under development, it's about capturing CO2 from industries, cement production, waste to energy, for instance. And we are now looking into CCS projects. Actually, even I wouldn't believe that was going to happen, but CO2 capture on board ship. I think in the future we will see CCS as coming with when you build greenfield, you will just buy a new plant with CCS included. And
you
then,
mentioned a meeting in Düsseldorf.
yes.
So Norway's CCS ambitions are part of this whole project to decarbonize Europe, then, by the sounds of it.
Yes, I would say it's maybe to be bold, but I think Norway has been driving this focus on CCS for many years, and I don't know. First, I don't know if we would have the full-scale project, the Longship project in Norway without the FME and the Centre of Excellence for CCS in Norway. And I'm not sure if we would have had the CCS strategy in Europe without Norway's stubbornness when it comes to CCS. But Norway is not, of course, not alone. Netherlands is very, very active, the UK and so on. But the meeting in Düsseldorf was about to go there, meet the locals, meet the politicians, meet the industry, because there the industry, they have the CO2 emissions, but Germany doesn't have a legislation for handling CO2. And that goes many, many years back when we had the Schwarze Pumpe project, where there was a very strong resistance towards handling CO2 in Germany and storing it underground onshore. And that was a very good example on what can happen if you don't speak to people in the community.
Indeed. Another theme that all of you have brought up.
Yeah.
Laura, I wanted to ask you, you said that the policy framework you set up for the greenhouse gas removal project was deliberately technology agnostic, going to see what won out. And it's very early days, obviously, infancy of this whole process. What do you think is looking most promising? Can I ask you to peer into your crystal ball?
So I think that is still difficult because we don't know how these technologies will pan out. What we do know is that kind of thermodynamically, for example, direct air capture will always be on the higher end of the cost scale, no matter how many cost efficiencies are made. But it's a case that for deployment at gigaton scale of these technologies by the 2040s, we will need as many technologies, as many solutions as possible. So I'm deliberately going to not peer into my crystal ball too deeply for fear of getting it wrong. Who would have predicted offshore wind cost falls? Who would have predicted the cost falls in solar? One interesting thing to always think about is which solution fits with each country. DAC is quite energy intensive, can be quite heat intensive, and therefore more suited to certain countries rather than others. So Texas is exploring it actively, Iceland is. The UK is certainly looking to develop the technology, but whether or not it will be deployed at scale in the UK by the 2040s is an interesting question.
Thank you, Laura. Lots of people on our expert panel are itching to put questions to you. But before that, I'm going to sneak in a question to Arunabh Ghosh, which has come in from one of our viewers. It's from Alexander Haider, who says, he's very interested in what you're saying about the need to create some kind of financing mechanism so that you don't have such variations in interest rates paid by renewable projects. And his question is, if I haven't lost it already, how would you implement a mechanism that decouples renewables from US dollar interest rates? Do we need some kind of global renewables interest rate? That sounds quite optimistic, Alexander, or what? Explain it to us.
No, that's a great question. You know, how do we do it? Because it's not just about the individual risk that a project faces, right? I mean, if you were a developer yourself, or I'm a developer myself, I would have to handle my own business risk, right? And that's why I've gotten, presumably, you've decided to bid for the projects. But for these macro risks, you need to take the risk away from the project developer, but you also need to take the risk away from individual countries. Because what happens is all of Kenya will have one kind of risk rating. So it doesn't matter if you were a more efficient developer versus a more inefficient developer, you're impacted by the same macro risk. So one of the ways, and something I wrote about a year and a half ago, a global clean investment risk mitigation mechanism, that you create a multi-jurisdictional risk de-risking facility. Now, the way this operates, or could operate, is that the risks are pooled across different geographies. The projects are also pooled across different geographies. So you're creating a portfolio that is much larger, and where the risks are then balanced out across different geographies. It's a similar way to how insurance works. Now, this goes back to your question, Nisha, earlier about finance versus investment. The concessional finance has to be the first loss in this, right? The bulk of the risk is still taken up by insurance companies, but a first loss needs to be publicly financed.
Right.
So when we say blended finance, imagine baking a cake. If you threw the eggs and the flour and the batter and the oil and the chocolate chips all together in the blender at the same time, you will get cake, but it will not taste as good. So what you need is, what's the sweetener first to blend the butter in, right? Which then helps to bind in the rest. The reason I say this is because this is where limited public investment, either flowing through reformed multilateral development banks or bilaterally, can offer that 5, 7, 10% of the initial loss. That then helps to crowd in the other insurance providers, the Swiss Re's of the world, etc., to come into the refinancing of renewables projects. Once you know your 25-year project can be refinanced every 5 years with a proper de-risking facility, your cost of finance immediately begins to go down, rather than you trying to take a loan for 25 years.
Very quick
Once
question.
you've done that...
Very quick question, Dr.
Sorry.
Ghosh. Is anyone biting on this? Are we likely to see anything like this anytime soon?
I think the reform agenda that you see from the World Bank, the report that came out from Larry Summers and N.K. Singh for the G20, the bigger, bolder, better approach towards the World Bank, is something that other regional development banks and even bilateral financing and even domestic public investment should look at. Today, if you take the estimates, even from the OECD of climate finance, the ratio of public to private investment is 5:1. It should be the other way around. It should be 1:10. Limited public investment, leveraging 10x times. So in order to do that, we've got to stop thinking about development finance institutions as project financiers, and make them largely play the role of first loss guarantors.
Yeah,
and
very
de-risking
interesting.
providers.
And you leverage then that. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghosh. Let's have some questions from our panelists who've been sitting here very patiently. Anna Wieczorek.
Oh, it doesn't work? Does it work? It does.
Yeah, just press it on.
It did, but it doesn't work. I press this one. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go for it.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the inspirational talks. My question is about CCS.
Okay.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about the downsides of CCS, because the same IPCC report that is talking about the potential and that this is really necessary, and I agree. It also says that this is a very inefficient technology, still very expensive, and I also hear voices that it can lock us in and legitimize further production of CO2 emissions. So I wonder how you see it. Is it a real risk? And if yes, then what would it take to avoid such risks that we don't stall the energy transition?
And a number of the questions that have come through are on the similar lines,
okay,
Anna.
thank you.
Yes. Mona.
Just to get your question right, when you say a risk, was it the risk about storing CO2 or the risk about investing in CCS technology?
No, it's about locking us into old way of doing things, into fossil fuel-based energy system and continuing production, because companies very often don't have the reason to get out of
it's
it.
a crutch to business as usual.
Yes, I know this is said, and I know there are reports out there saying CCS shouldn't be done, and it's possible to get to net zero without CCS, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. So, and it's not, how do you going to get rid of the CO2 from a cement factory? Because when you produce cement, two-thirds of the CO2 comes from the calcination process. It's not from the fuel. So when you can't avoid the CO2 emission by converting to renewables, you are still there with the CO2, and you want to get rid of it. And it seems like, and this about locking in, it's a task, as I see it, for the politicians to develop these the regulations, the policy, in a way, and that we doesn't just continue as usual, and that we need to get the energy policy and the climate policy linked up together, because as it is today, it doesn't match. Because, for instance, Norway is a very good example. In Norway, we produce, as you know, a lot of oil and gas, and it's mostly exported. When this oil and gas is used outside Norway, it produces about 550 million tons of CO2 per year. And when it comes to the rules in the world, this is not a problem for Norway. I don't think this is going to be like that in the future. And I think we also in Norway needs to handle these scope 3 emissions when it comes from products that is exported from Norway. But still, as I said, I've been working with CCS for 25 years, and there is a very big difference between renewables and CCS, which come from the only reason you would do CCS is because you really need to handle the climate change. So if you didn't have the climate change issue, you would never do CCS. But renewables, you would do renewables despite climate change, because it's smart to do it and you can use the sun and the wind and water and so on. So keeping this in mind and developing sound policy for this transformation. And that's where I think I'm kind of arguing for research, because it's not easy to develop this policy that is going to make this happen. You need very good analysis, and you need new models, because we don't have these models yet. We don't have models that links various types of energy and decarbonization solutions to land use and biodiversity. Or we have, but they are not fully linked yet with the energy system models.
Thanks very much. I'm going to take it away from you there, if you don't mind, Mona.
Sorry.
But I mean, I think to summarize, I think possibly, Mona, if you don't mind, putting it very crudely, is saying we have no alternative in response to you, Anna. Is there anyone amongst our expert panelists who doesn't have a CCS-related question burning away inside them? Okay, Ivan Flatterland.
Yes, thanks to all the presenters for a very interesting presentation. I have a question for Joachim.
Is the mic on here?
I think it is, yeah.
Okay, just bring it a bit closer to you then, Ivan.
Sorry. So suppliers have a critical role in the energy transition, and at the same time we've seen suppliers, especially in Europe, struggle over the last few years. So from your perspective, what do suppliers need to scale up in accordance with the market's need that we see from the energy transition?
Thank you. That's something we also try to figure out. Look, predictability, as simple as that. If we know there is a market, if we know there is basically, if there is something that we can do business with, then we will make business out of it. If it is something that is not, predictable, unsure, timing unsure, financing unsure, what is the business case, those are the topics that die. And we had it here also on the screen earlier with also developing technologies. There are a lot of developing technologies out there, but it's very simple. If there is not a business case behind it, they will die. So for us, it's all about predictability.
Do you want to chip in on that as well, Ragnhild?
Well, I think that I fully understand the need for predictability, and of course that is some of the challenge that we face to make sure that we have supply when we need it, and also all the sort of global uncertainty hasn't helped to have that predictability, obviously. And then I work a lot on the sort of far end of the new stuff. And then, I'm sure that my fellow panelists on direct air capture and CCS, I mean, on stuff that are far out, to work down with suppliers becomes even more challenging to get the sufficient attention and collaboration to mature those things.
So in the mix, when you're trying to make decisions about far horizon investments, predictability is clearly one of the issues. What else do you think is really critical when you're having to make decisions, whether to put something to the board or not?
No, when we talk about the sort of more immature technologies, obviously it's different challenges that we face. For the existing technologies, it's to get scale, speed, and so on. It might be easier then to work together and have sort of the right pace. When it's new things, then we need to do research, we need to mature the things and sort of see the rationale for actually doing those first investments, and then policies come into the picture. I think it's very interesting what Laura was saying, that you try to make a policy that's agnostic in terms of what you're actually pushing forward. That must be really difficult to still give the right incentives. So that is a big challenge, I think, for us to really connect sort of markets, technologies, and policies to get some speed on the more immature things.
Let's have another question from our panelists. Rita Bowman.
Thank you very much for very thought-provoking presentations.
Please, I'm going to ask you to speak up because we can barely hear you.
Oh, can't you hear me? Okay. So I was actually going to invite you all and the panelists to think about another side of scaling up and speed, which are people and communities. So my question is kind of also a reflection. So how do you think, and to what extent are we actually working on how to harmonize this need for scaling up and speed with the communities that are facing very much and proportionally increasing changes in lives and communities? So because I think so far creating more jobs narrative is not working. So how are we about making these measures towards them concrete, both from a policy but also from companies who actually interact with communities on a more daily today basis?
Who'd like to pick up on that first? Mona, go on.
I think knowledge sharing and being open is not the only solution, but I think it's very, very important. I think we need to give the politicians tools to present their kind of what they are weighing against each other, so they can explain why they are falling down to one decision or another. Because people aren't stupid, they want to know, and they want the truth.
Okay, knowledge share from Mona. Let's have a quick idea from all of you. Aruna Pakosh, are you with us? Well, you mentioned the brass manufactory in Moradabad. Can you give us some other examples of ways in which people's lives are changing?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, let's just understand the scale of the potential here. We estimate that large-scale, utility-scale renewables, as we deploy it over this decade, would create a workforce of 1 million people, but which would translate to about 3.5 million full-time equivalent jobs, because the same person can go from different projects, from one project to another through the year. Now, distributed renewables creates 7 times more jobs per unit of electricity produced than even utility-scale renewables, which creates more jobs than gas, which creates more jobs than coal. When we look at the scale of distributed renewables and the direct and indirect jobs that can be created, we're looking at over 37 million jobs that can be created in this space. Now, how do you translate this macro potential into something real? If you came to our offices right now, you will see the technology exhibition, which has solar-powered silk reeling machines, solar-powered refrigerators, solar-powered micro-irrigation pumps, solar-powered fruit processing machines. All of this put together is a $50 billion market opportunity. Now, in order to capitalize on this, what we have done is a program called Powering Livelihoods. We evaluated more than 100 startups, supported 6 initially, then 12. In the next round, we'll support about 20, get them to a commercial scale of about $1 million of sales through enterprise support, entrepreneur support, and ecosystem support. Why ecosystem support? Because these local jobs will only come true when you're locally creating the training, locally helping out with the after-sales service, locally helping out with the mapping of the market, and so forth. So it's not just about who's screwing on that solar panel, but the whole supply chain around it. And that's how subsector by subsector we can scale it up. Based on our own experience alone and a few others that are happening in India, the government of India is the first country that's come out with a policy on using distributed renewables for livelihoods. Now, this is a model that can then scale in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asia, and so forth, which is why I say
I'm going to take it away from you. Thank you very much.
Has to be brought closer to people. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And it speaks to a question from Julia Sports, who was asking exactly that. Would distributed generation help to have more social community support? So I hope she's answered your question, Julia. Who else is going to answer? Go on, Joachim.
I can take another approach. I mean, it doesn't matter really what we're building or where we're building it. If we need some sort of public support and acceptance on it, we need to start it at an early stage, not to run into the risk that we develop something and then it gets stopped because it wasn't, acceptable in that community. That's waste of resources. It doesn't matter what we're building. We cannot afford that wasting resources anymore.
Laura.
Briefly, again, it's important to learn the lessons from other technologies which have deployed, so not losing the room, not losing communities before a process of kind of co-development, education has been done. Some of that is on the project developers as well, because community-based impacts, there's the positive narrative of jobs and skills, but if it has an impact on kind of local infrastructure, then that's kind of best dealt with at a project level. Government can have a role in just disseminating high-quality information. I would use the example of bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, which is quite controversial as a technology, because intuitively, you are burning trees and you're claiming that it's carbon negative. What we did was we commissioned scientific reports, which were kind of subject to scrutiny in order to show that bioenergy with carbon capture and storage is net negative. The next task will be to digest that scientific life cycle assessment into plain English language so as to kind of explain why BECCS is negative.
Yeah, I just want to add to, having a dialogue with the local communities in addition to the knowledge part is very essential, and doing it at an early stage. It was mentioned already in the first session today, that we need to make trade-offs, not just where we can scale up the fastest, but also taking into account those perspectives before we even choose which markets and which locations we do scale up. So that is a very key point. Thanks for bringing it up.
I think we have time for one more question. Stephen Gabriel.
Yeah, so I'm following up on the general discussion. I think, Rita, you took most of my question, but I'll adjust it a little bit. So one of the great politicians in the U.S. is Tip O'Neill. He's not alive anymore, I don't believe. He was Speaker of the House, number 3, and he said all politics is local. So I could say all energy transition is local. So if you look at fracking of gas, 2 neighboring states, Pennsylvania and New York had a moratorium on it. Pennsylvania, quite the opposite. So a little bit more maybe in the UK discussion, it's not just jobs is obviously very important, it's attitudes. How do you come to the most efficient way to bring the uptake of that so that it actually works, as opposed to concentrating just on more grid, which is obviously grid capacity, which is great, but the social uptake of it in a regionalized, localized manner? That's my question. So it's a little bit like yours. Yeah.
Do you want to pick up on that, Laura?
Sure. So there's a few factors to consider. One of them is public perceptions, but also what you touched on there is you still need to take a holistic, most efficient, most cost-effective approach towards the energy transition. And I think this is where kind of the national and the local intersects, and there's no simple answer to it. I think top-level targets do have to be driven according to the models that show the least cost, most actually implementable approach to net zero. and then when you bring those down to the local level, thinking about, I suppose, where either might be most acceptable or most cost efficient. But it's certainly a challenge, which I would acknowledge.
I think we've got to have this question, which has come in from Mohammed Zishan Khalid, which is about talent shortages, because everybody's spoken about it, right from the beginning of the morning with our rector, Tor Grande. How do industries, firstly, and then generally, how do countries deal with talent shortages when it comes to the energy transition? Because people want to do other things. They want to go into tech or finance or whatever it might be. How do you deal with that? Go for it, Ragnhild.
This is a very, very important point, I think, for our industry, because we see that it's even more important than ever that, first of all, we take care of the people that we already have in our company, and also that we recruit the right people and onboard them efficiently. And in Statkraft, we've onboarded more than 1,000 people last year on a base of, we started out with sort of 5,000, now we're 6,000 people. And achieving that, making sure they feel welcome, get into challenges, and also stay with us is critical. And I see that we recruit not just for the competence and the skills, but also for the attitude and the way that these people are able to sort of adapt to the new context. So that's a sort of advice for students out there.
So
is also
even if they don't have the skills and a perfect match to begin with, you're going to help them to get there. Is that what you're saying?
If they have the right attitude, because we don't have all the competence. We see that we're short on many of the, especially the new areas.
That's a good message, right? Mona.
I work as a research director in SINTEF and recruit a lot of people. And it's like you can think of it as athlete training. So you compete and collaborate and you train for success. The government needs to continue and increase support research in this area, because they are cutting, and it's unbelievable, but it's true. So we need increased support for relevant energy transition research. By that, we can build capacity in research infrastructure, educating people and train them for this very important task where we need so much more capacity.
Okay, so you're saying that there are the candidates, but there isn't sufficient funding for them to continue their research?
Yes, I'm really worried now, and we really need to see a change in Norway. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Joachim, from a supplier point of view, how do you draw in the talent? Why should they come to Siemens Energy? You didn't have a great year last year financially.
No, we didn't.
What's your pitch? Why should I apply to you?
We've been around for a few years, so we'll get out of this one also. Look, we, of course, obviously, we are a known company or no brand, so I think we get a head start on that one. But basically, it's the same thing. You need to get the right talent with the right attitude. That's first and foremost at the right places. But that is also a thing, where do we place them? I mean, we're a global company. Where can we actually pull together that resource pool that we need? And I want to share a discussion I overheard in the bus yesterday from the airport. Two gentlemen who were obviously from somewhere UK. Sorry if you're here, I'm not going to say who it was. Anyway, they were discussing about growing their business in Trondheim. And one of them was some sort of manager, and he basically said, yeah, he would love to do that, but he can't find the resources in Trondheim. This was from yesterday. And this is, the struggles we are facing with. It is not just one or two or three. We need more people, and we need to see where can we find them.
I have a lovely question that's come in from someone who calls himself or herself young climate enthusiast. So thank you very much for following us. And I think it's a question for Arnab Ghosh firstly, but others might want to chip in as well. And it's quite simple. It's just saying, what do you think wealthy countries like Norway or the US, other countries in Europe, should be doing to accelerate the transition in Asia, where the majority of people live and have aspirations for their own lives?
Invest. In one word, invest. If you want me to expand on it, I know there are Canadian pension funds investing in India's renewable energy transition. So we welcome Norwegian pension funds to invest in India's renewable energy transition. The point goes back to what I said earlier, right? Yes, investing in emerging markets is going to be riskier, but it does not mean your money is going to disappear. This is where India is going to present the fastest growth rate in energy demand. Your load curves are flat. Our energy demand is going up like that. It's going to be minimum 2x, probably 3x increase in energy demand. Someone's going to build this infrastructure, and someone's going to make money of building this infrastructure. Money has to flow to where the sun shines the most. That's what economic logic dictates. We've got to make sure that our regulatory markets, our financial markets, and our vehicles for international coordination, not just cooperation, are aligned towards making that money just does not circulate in capital-rich regions, but goes from capital-rich to capital-poor regions, not as a dole-out, but as a real investment opportunity.
Thank you very much, Arunapa. And of course, the world's biggest pension fund is none other than the Norwegian one. Do I need to remind anyone? That was a good pitch. Any of you want to add your voices to that, Mona?
I think we can do more research together also, and not thinking of developing countries as not high-skilled, a lot of very high-skilled people, and there's a lot of collaboration opportunities.
Great. Let's have a question from Jay Edmonds. I think you can sneak one in.
Sure. I'm going to slightly change the subject, but not much.
By all means.
There are trillions of dollars that need to be transferred to developing economies in order to simultaneously create a green transition and fund economic development. And those twin goals are going to require a lot of transfer of investment. In the Paris Agreement, there's an Article 6, which says that countries can implement their nationally determined contributions cooperatively. You don't see much talk about that, but the research indicates that there could be hundreds of billions of dollars transferred annually in terms of investment flows through Article 6. What would need to happen to enable that to go from virtually zero to meeting its potential?
Laura, your thoughts?
Brilliant point, and thank you for bringing up Article 6, because it really is the next piece of the puzzle. What would need to happen is more detail is still being worked up on the logistics of how Article 6 would work in practice, and whether or not, for my country's nationally determined contribution, can I essentially buy credits from another country, and how can corresponding adjustments be made such that we're not double counting two countries claiming for the same credit. So more work on that needs to be done, but it will present a huge opportunity, and it will enable us to meet the energy transition in a more efficient manner.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm going to say thank you to all our panelists for giving us a very interesting and insightful discussion. Arunapa Ghosh, it's been a pleasure having you with us. I'm so glad we made the connection with Delhi. It's been inspirational. Bye-bye for now. Laura Hurley, Ragnhild Ulvik, Mona Molnvik, and Joachim Lagerfeld, thank you so much for putting your heads together and joining us in this joint endeavor. Let's put our hands together and say thank you.